This is Showtime, a podcast about the people behind the curtain and the stories that shape them. I'm Andrew G, and each week I sit down with creatives, leaders and risk takers from the theatre world and beyond. We talk about what they do, why they do it, and what it really takes to keep showing up. Today I'm joined by powerhouse vocalist Mahalia Barnes. From growing up in one of Australia's most iconic musical families to starring in Jesus Christ Superstar, Mahalia shares her journey, her love of live performing, and what it really takes to find your voice within. Welcome to Showtime, Mahalia Barnes.
Thank you for having me.
What is your earliest memory being surrounded by music?
I don't even know where to start. All of my memories pretty much involve music, from being around shows, in the studio, on tour, or just, hearing music all the time. Our whole family obviously surrounds ourselves with music. I wouldn't know what my earliest memory would be, but I do know that there are photos of me as a small baby bundled up in a lid of a road case by the side of a stage. So it's all I've known. And
you were saying before that you now do the same with your kids.
Yeah. I drag them around to shows with me. My eldest is 15 and she's just started releasing her own music. She released her EP a couple of weeks ago and is writing lots of songs and doing that. And Rosie, my little one, is 8 and she at the moment is currently hanging out with me in Melbourne, and most of the time she spends sitting side stage or in the dressing room while we're on stage doing the show, because she just wants to hang out with mum and be around it.
So growing up in a musical family for you, was it pressure or inspiration?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. I mean, I never was made to feel pressure or expectation around performing or around creating music from the family or from any of our friends. But inevitably there is that external pressure that comes from outside of, assuming that you get an easy ride, or putting an extra sort of layer of scrutiny, I suppose, on who you are as a performer, as an artist. But for the most part, for me, it was inspiration, because I was surrounded by people who are incredibly talented and working really hard and doing what they love. And it's really easy to see how much the people who have endurance and, a big career in this industry, it depends on how much you love it, because it is hard work, and it's all of the fun and all of the excitement that you see on the surface level. But, I had the opportunity and the privilege of getting to see all of the sides of it, which I think is very helpful when you make a decision whether or not you're going to go into this world. So, it's a little bit of both.
Were you ever tempted to do anything completely outside of music?
Not since I was a small child. I think I remember being about 7 years old and thinking that maybe I could be an Olympic swimmer or something like that. When they ask you what you're going to be at school, and, people say, I'm going to be a teacher, or I'm going to be all of the different options at that point. But in reality, I think it was from when I was in my early teens, I think that I knew that there was not anything else I wanted to do. I've had brief stints doing other jobs to make money, to support being an artist. But really, for me, it's always been, the goal has always been that music was my career.
And was there a particular moment when music moved from something you loved to do to something you wanted to take seriously as a career?
I don't remember a specific moment as such. I think it was always in the background, as it was. I guess I just never questioned that that's what I would do. Not that it was ever sort of put on me as pressure from family or anyone else. But I guess I just assumed that I would, because that's what everybody I knew was doing. But I do think that I remember being probably about 14 years old and deciding that I couldn't sing the way that I wanted to, and that I needed to work on it. And locking myself away. I was at boarding school at that time, and I would go. In the evenings we were allowed to use the music centre for music practice if we were students. And so I would go over and lock myself away in there when no one was there, and just sing and sing and sing and sing, and try and sing songs that I thought I couldn't sing, that would be hard for me, and, challenge myself to practice. And I think I started going on tour from when I was about 15. I was on tour. I'd already been doing bits and pieces, popping up at gigs here and there, and I'd been in the studio a few times. But that's when I started going more regularly out on tour, on the weekends and in holiday periods, and then sort of continued from there. It all escalated, and here we are.
And when you were in that studio by yourself, just slogging it out, trying to get to where you wanted to go but weren't able to get to, did you get there?
I think so. I remember there was for example, like a particular song that I used to love listening to that I thought, oh, imagine if I could sing like that.
What was it?
It was called Stay With Me Baby. It was Lorraine Ellison. I mean, I'm a huge soul music fan. Everything for me is soul, blues, gospel, you know, a little bit of rock and roll in there. And I always had loved that song. It's such a big range and it's so powerful and emotive, and I loved it. And I remember I would practice singing it and singing it and singing it until I could get those big higher parts in a full voice, you know. And so I would just sing it over and over. I mean, I've had no formal training, so I was not like I was doing lessons and practicing scales. I was just choosing songs I liked, songs I loved, and that moved me, and trying to find a way to be a part of that, I guess. What's
been the biggest challenge for you, carving out your own path in the world and bringing your own voice out?
Look, I think that growing up in a family where everybody makes music is sort of in equal parts, like creates obstacles as it does opens doors. You know, we all do make music and we all make completely different music, which is amazing. And I think that we've always been encouraged by dad and by mum and, you know, all of those around us to make sure that whatever it is we're doing, that it's what we love, because it won't last otherwise. So I never sort of struggled with my identity musically, I don't think. Like, I think that I always, you know, had the music that I loved and connected to and knew what I wanted to do. In reality, like finding your way through that in the industry, you know, particularly for me, like I said, I love soul and blues music, and that's not really contemporary mainstream music in this world. You know, I most of what I listen to is, you know, 60s and early 70s, and that's about it. You know, it's what I love. And so finding the right musicians to be around me, the right people who also love that music that I do, and then being able to, you know, learn how to write songs and craft, you know, a show. You know, that was sort of like a gradual process of, you know, that is, I think, a part of any artist's journey. You know, I don't think I was sort of like any sort of prodigy or anything like that. I just knew that I wanted it, and I had the opportunity to keep practicing and to keep playing shows. You know, I started playing shows, like I said, when I was in my teens, and I pretty much haven't stopped touring since. You know, I've made multiple albums and had the opportunity to tour all over the world. And one of the biggest things for me learning how to be, you know, the singer that I am, I think, was the opportunity to sing with lots of other great singers and people who I thought really kicked my ass, basically. Because I think that while, you know, there's lots of different opinions and, you know, music is competitive to a certain extent, you know, like by nature of being a performer, you have a certain amount of ego that you want to be great and you want to be liked and loved and all of that. For me, what the joy of music and performing is actually the collaborative element of working with musicians who inspire you, singers who inspire you, and also getting in front of an audience and having that connection and that transfer of energy. And so growing up, I had the opportunity to sing with a lot of really incredible singers that I think helped to form who I am as a singer and as an artist.
You mentioned that some of the music that you really love is not especially contemporary, yet you make a living as a musician. So how do you strike that balance between your creativity, your passion, and the work that's going to resonate with an audience and sell downloads and sell tickets?
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, the expectation of what is a successful artist is where the key to that is. You know, I think that, you know, what is defined as being a successful artist? You know, is it having, you know, all of the number ones and, you know, the most streams that you can possibly have and selling out Rod Laver Arena, or is it a continuous career of being able to do what you love? You know, and for everyone it's different. You know, for me personally, I have managed to, you know, thankfully make a career of singing mostly songs that I love, things that I want to do, with people that I love, and I get to do that continuously. You know, I'm not out there doing my own shows at Rod Laver as such. You know, although I've sung there plenty of times, but I am regularly touring, and I'm doing it in a way that is completely within my you know, control and boundaries. Like, I get to decide what shows I do, when I do them, and I'm very grateful to have an audience that comes along and supports me. And I think that a big part of that is because I really try to make sure that I'm always doing something that I love, and I think that people feel that resonates with people. It may not be the mainstream commercial radio type music because that's not what I love, but it's music that people do love, and that's the thing. Everyone has their different connection to songs and to music, and I think that it is deeply personal, and yet it's something that we can all share and use as a language that communicates, that helps us to communicate between, all different types of people, all different generations, all different backgrounds, and that's sort of the beauty of music. So between doing that for my own stuff with my band, The Soulmates, we tour around and do all that sort of thing constantly. We play, hundreds of shows every year. I also love working with other artists, and so for me, I've been able to do lots of, recordings and tours as a backing singer or a feature vocalist for different groups. I've toured all over the world and I've done all sorts of genres, everything from I've sung on George Benson records, and I've played, live shows with a heavy metal band, and I've done hip hop shows. I've toured for many, many years over in Europe and the States with, a great blues guitarist named Joe Bonamassa. So Liam Gallagher I toured with. I get to sing all different styles of music, and because I do love music and I love so much different music, it's great to be able to do lots of different things. I don't want to be stuck doing just one thing. I don't think that suits me and who I am. I like to do everything I can.
What a great segue into musical theatre. I believe you're in a show.
I am. It's my very first show. I'm doing Jesus Christ Superstar, and it's if you'd asked me a couple of years ago if you thought you'd see me up on a theatre stage, I probably would have said absolutely not. But here I am, and I'm loving it.
How did it happen? Where was the opportunity to join Jesus Christ Superstar coming from?
Look, I've been asked to be part of shows over the years at different points, to come and audition for different roles in different shows, and it's just sort of never felt quite right to me, or not where I wanted to be at the time, or a role that I thought I could be authentically myself in and bring something to. And so when I was asked if I would come and audition for the role of Mary in Jesus Christ Superstar, it was sort of the first time that it really piqued my interest, and I thought, actually, maybe this could suit me. It's such an iconic show. It's a show that originated as an album in the 70s, a concept album in the 70s, which obviously resonates with me, being that it throws back to a world and a time and a genre that I love, and it's also a timeless story that is a part of our humanity, religious or not. It's a part of our human story, and our identity as human beings, the themes that carry through the show of, idol worship and of mob mentality and of love and, of betrayal and, all of these different things that we see through the story of Jesus Christ Superstar. They're really essential parts of our world and of humanity and things that we all know really well. It's like whether or not you read the Bible or you don't, we know what this is about. It's about us. It's about people, and it's about society. And it's just a show that I thought, well, this could be one that works for me, because it's always featured artists and musicians. From the very beginning in the 70s, Ian Gillan was involved. There's Yvonne Elliman played the original Mary, and she was just beautiful. Especially in this country, there's an incredible legacy that is tied to Jesus Christ Superstar, starting from the original version in the 70s that had, John English and Marsha Hines, and all these incredible artists were a part of it. I think there was Stevie Wright was involved. There was so many different people in that 70s production that went on to that were already or went on to become absolute icons of Australian music. In the 90s, we saw the Arena Spectacular version that featured, obviously, the incredible John Farnham as Jesus, and
all the Johns, John Stephen, John Waters,
was in there.
And of course Kate Sobrano as Mary.
Yeah, and that's I never actually got to see the show, but it was so present in our world, as a I was born in the 80s, and so this was in the 90s. I was so aware of what it was doing and of how big a deal it was, and I heard those songs everywhere, and so there's a real sort of, I guess, familiarity to the songs as well that I love. And so, yeah, I just thought, well, maybe this is the time to give something different a go. I do quite like to be pushed out of my comfort zone and do all of the things, as I said. So I went in and auditioned, and very grateful that I'm getting this opportunity to play Mary, across the country in the show. It's a spectacular show, and it's an incredible cast. And I think that for me, that was my biggest concern, was like, what's it going to be like being in this new type of environment where I'm not in charge of everything, for a start, because I'm a bit of a control freak, but also like, who's going to be playing all these other characters, and, what does this look like doing the same thing 8 times a week? Because I come from such a different world, obviously with, the upbringing that I have and the touring life, but also just like, on my shows these days, I don't even write a set list. I take requests. I do whatever I feel like in the moment, how it feels with that audience, with the band on that day. And, I love to be able to be sort of improvising and be, out of my comfort zone. I don't ever want to be, I guess, too taking it easy on a show. I want to work, I want to feel inspired. I want to inspire others. And so I thought, how am I going to do 8 shows a week where I sing the exact same thing at the exact same time with the exact same people, and how's that going to feel?
That's right. There's nothing spontaneous about
Nothing.
musical theatre. There are lighting cues, there are sound cues,
Yeah.
there are set transition cues, and if you go off, everything sort of falls like a set of dominoes. So how has that been for you, settling into that, but also keeping it fresh?
Yeah,
8 times a week.
I guess that's what was sort of my biggest concern, but actually it's been really wonderful, and I've really enjoyed the process of finding a way to be inspired and passionate and fresh, as you say, and still love it, doing it with that repetitive sort of nature is very foreign to me. Obviously when we do big shows and you're on tour and whatever, there's, and there is a set list and there are plans. The lighting designer has their ideas of what they want to do. The sound guys are mixing to what, they're expecting you to do. There's only so much room for, improvising and spontaneity in a lot of shows, just for it to, be slick and professional, I guess. So it's not that I can't, but I like to have the choice, and so this has been really interesting for me to not have that, and to just have to find a way within that repetitive sort of 8-show-a-week schedule of finding a way to still feel inspired by it, and to make sure that I'm giving what the audience deserves. And I think the way that has happened for me, the biggest factor of that is that the ensemble, the cast that we have on stage are incredible, and they're working so hard, and they give so much, and it is inspiring. And so the fact that they can turn up and do that with such discipline and such passion and, such incredible ability makes me go, well, I better pick my game up and be good as well. But also I realised that even within those sort of what are seemingly very strict boundaries, it is actually still, there's lots of little things that change all the time. The energy from the audience is one of the hugest things. We have a totally different feeling on a Wednesday matinee than a, Friday night, and neither is better or worse. It's just completely different. And that inevitably provokes a different performance from us, because at the end of the day, we're all artists. And so we are really dependent on that transfer of energy. Equally, it's some days everyone's feeling different, and we give each other a little more or a little less, or something a little bit different, a bit of a curveball here and there. We've had a fair bit of injury and illness and all of that stuff that happens too, and people get their leave that they're granted to go and do family things or other weddings or whatever they've got to go to. And so then we have little cast changes, and it's like every time that happens it feels completely different. Like, Michael Paynter, who's playing Jesus, is one of the most consistent and incredibly disciplined and, beautiful singers that I've ever known. I've known him for probably about 20 years now. And, I know him. I've been on tour with him. He's friends with my little brother, so I've known him since he was, a teenager. But every single night he gets up there, every single show, 8 times a week, and he just delivers the most beautiful renditions of these songs and gives so much of himself. He's so passionate about the story, and he loves Jesus, so he's like, he feels a lot of weight and pressure, I think, to be playing that role, and he just delivers so much, and so that is so inspiring. But there have been shows where he was off, like in Perth. He didn't do Perth because he had prior work already booked in over in Nashville, because he's an incredible producer and songwriter that's very in demand. And so we had a different Jesus for all of Perth, and that was completely different for me. It was completely out of my comfort zone, because it wasn't, my mate that I've hung out with for 20 years, who I know exactly what he's going to sound like and do. His name was Rob Tripolino, and it was fantastic, but it was just a whole new experience for me. And so that really changed it. And then we've got some amazing covers, like there's a young boy in the cast. He's a young man. I shouldn't call him a boy. He's not a boy. And his name is Sam Harmon, and he's one of the covers who, if Michael was sick or was off, he would cover Jesus. He also covers Pilate, and he also covers Peter. And he is nothing like Michael, but he's an absolutely beautiful performer. He's a beautiful actor who's so deeply connected to whatever role he's playing. And I was really nervous about what it was going to be like the first time I did the show with him. And it just felt completely different for me, but in a good way. Like, I was so moved by his performance and his energy, and it made me play Mary differently, because it really is about that connection to each other. And so I've really actually enjoyed all of those little changes that give it a little bit of freshness for me, but also challenge me to then still deliver the show as I should when things aren't exactly as they're written to be.
What has being in Jesus Christ Superstar taught you as a performer?
I think that hopefully it's taught me a little bit of acting skill. I don't know, I'll let those who have seen it be the judge of that, because I've never thought about acting in my life, and so that was a challenge. I've had to learn some choreography. I am certainly not dancing, but there is choreography that has been challenging for me. But more than anything, it's just about the appreciation of not needing chaos and change all the time to find the inspiration. I think that's been a really important lesson for me, finding the way through that and understanding that, it's that singing the songs is what is the inspiration, and, simply just that, and delivering, for the audience that is there. And I think that it's given me a little bit more discipline than I've probably had to have in my life before, and just gratitude for the people around me and for the people who do so much. I think that, I know how touring bands work, and I know how, artists work in the studio, and I know a lot about the music industry and the record labels and, the agents and promoters and all of that stuff. But I've never really had an appreciation in the same way for the theatre world, because I've just never been a part of it. I've seen my brother David do shows, but it's just never really occurred to me how many moving parts there are and what people are doing to make that show happen. And it's really extraordinary. It's such an incredible team of people on this show, behind the scenes as well as on stage. And, to see, I now understand, I suppose, how it is that, these shows are so loved and have been there, and the importance of respecting and valuing that as an audience member, but also as a performer and as an artist, to know that you're a part of continuing that legacy of something that is not just about you, but rather, in this case, it's over 50 years of this being a hugely popular show, and that's an amazing honour to be able to be a part of carrying that on. And so, it's taught me a lot.
Do you think the experience has unlocked something new in your artistry?
I don't know. I guess so. At this point in time, I came into this very, very comfortable with who I am as an artist. And I think I will leave, just as comfortable, maybe even a little more comfortable in who I am as an artist, because I've reached a point in my career and in my life, I think part of it is, 30 years on stage, 30 plus years on stage now, but also, all of the background and the upbringing that I've had. And then you add to that just life and being a parent, and realizing that, not everybody does, I'm sure, but I've certainly had to really learn a lot about myself, particularly in the years since having children. And so I'm very comfortable with who I am and who I am as an artist. And so what I've realized is that artistry is a constant changing and growing and evolving state to be in, and that I know exactly who I am and I know what I'm capable of, and that there's a certain amount of freedom that comes with that, of just trusting yourself to do it and doing it for the right reasons. It's like, I know that I'm going to be doing this forever. I know that I'm going to be doing it whether or not there are people in the room or it's just me, or whether it's, as my career or whether it's just for fun, because both things can be true and are true. I wouldn't say it's necessarily changed me or opened up another world, because I think that I'd already gotten to the point where I was open to all the possibilities. But it's definitely taught me, a different discipline, I suppose.
I'm chatting with Mahalia Barnes, who's playing Mary right now in Jesus Christ Superstar. It's playing at Melbourne's Princess Theatre before heading to Brisbane in June. For more info and tickets, jesuschristsuperstarmusical.com.au. Mahalia, thank you so much for coming into the studio, and all the best for the rest of the tour.
Oh, thank you. An absolute pleasure.